Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. In this training session, you'll learn the biggest differences between on-prem Hyperion Planning and Oracle PBCS. Next slide, please. So our resident expert, Angie, is going to share tips for navigating the simplified interface, particularly if you're used to working with Workspace. She'll cover changes to expect for users as well as admins. Next slide, please. But first, I'll take a moment to introduce ourselves. US Analytics has been a full-service EPM consulting firm for over 15 years. Our team has more than 65 EPM and BI professionals, and we're active leaders in the Oracle community. We're proud founders of the Hyperion Professional Women's Forum, and we speak every year at Kscope. And these are our range of services and solutions that we offer. Next slide, please. In this time, we've delivered over 1,000 successful Hyperion engagements with over 500 different clients. You can see here the variety of industries that we work with. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I'll hand it over to Angie to dive into our training content. Take it away, Angie.
All right, I'm going to go back up to here for a minute so no one's distracted. My name is Angela Wilcox, and my friends do call me Angie. So I know some of you I know that are on this list out there. I have been working in the Hyperion space since like S-Base 2.1, back when it was owned by Arbor, and then through the Hyperion merger there, and then the acquisition by Oracle and planning and so on and so forth. I got out of the industry for a little while, took a break to actually do some other BI type stuff in the medical profession, and then I came back in about a year ago now and started in on the consulting again. So it's good to be back. I know that there were some bets going on how long I would stay gone, because I really love this industry. I love this vertical, and I can probably go on and on about it for a long time. So internally, as we were tossing around ideas for a webinar, one of the things that I got into a discussion with some of our managed services team members is some of the really large differences between excuse me, PBCS, or Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service, and actually on-premise planning. And, you know, one of our folks was saying, wow, I have worked with the tool a long time, and I really have a hard time finding everything because I don't know where they've stuck it. I don't know for sure that it still exists. So I'm not sure if I have the same functionality or different functionality. And then the simplified interface itself is just so different. And so the simplified interface, which is what we're going to focus on today, is an issue to you, and it affects you if you have purchased PBCS or ePBCS, the Enterprise Edition. It applies to both. If you've purchased either of those since August 1st of last year, all you have is the simplified workface or the simplified interface available to you. For everyone else, the drop dead that Oracle gave at the last quarter of last year was that in December of 2017, when that release comes through, the simplified interface is all that anyone will have. Now, we know that Oracle in the past has pushed some of these dates, and so, you know, this is what we know today, and it could get pushed again. But I think the best idea is start learning the simplified interface, getting to know it, getting comfortable in it, so that when it does finally get pushed and you don't have Workspace and the old Workspace look and feel, you're already used to the new simplified interface, and you can just roll with it and really not be too affected. I think that when we start talking about the simplified interface and you see some of the things that are available in it that are not available in Workspace, you might consider converting earlier rather than later. I balked at this. I did not want to use it. I knew where I was going in Workspace, and lo and behold, I got a customer that, you know, only had Simplified. So I had to learn it, and I had to learn to get around. And now it's just the opposite for me. I do not want to go back to Workspace. I don't want to have to use the tools as they are in Workspace. For me, it's a lot more kludgy and a lot more clicks, a lot more roaming around to get to the same space. So I've really adopted the Simplified interface, and I like it a lot. And when we've done trainings, you know, it's a lot easier to train. It's a lot easier to teach your super users where to go, how to get around. And so while the look and feel of things did change pretty remarkably, the functionality is nearly the same. And we'll talk in the admin section about a couple of things that we lost, because we did lose a couple of things. But for the most part, the changes were very additive, and in some instances, they only exist in the Simplified interface. You actually don't have these options available in Workspace at all. And so we will take a look at a couple of those and a couple of the whistles and bells of what you can do with the Simplified interface that is not available in Workspace. So on the user side, let's talk about user changes first and foremost. Users access planning two different ways. We all know this. They access it through SmartView. They access it on the web. What is the number one complaint to accessing on the web? For years and years and years, it has been speed. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't put a form out on the web. It is so slow. It doesn't even work. It's horrible. It's terrible. And I think people all but gave up ever even letting their users on the web because the performance was so bad that they just decided they didn't want to deal with the web. So one of the things that you have to understand about PBCS and ePBCS is that in these latest releases, they didn't just take on-premise and put it up on the cloud. They actually redeveloped the product for the cloud. And so we find that a lot of the speed elements that we used to have, a lot of the complaints that we used to have that, oh my gosh, this is so slow on the web, a lot of that is not true anymore. And the functionality on the web is a lot quicker. It's much more robust. Plus, there are a number of things that the user can do on the web that they didn't used to be able to do. And so I think that being able to have that now makes the web a viable option for our users. If they want to use the web, great. If they want to use SmartView, great. They can do more on the web than they can do on SmartView, but SmartView, it remains the same. The only thing that has changed with SmartView that you'll see once you're off of the on-premise is that you used to have a drop-down in SmartView to be able to run some of your financial reports straight from SmartView. That folder has gone away, and you can still look at the report in SmartView, but you must start the initiation of that report on the web. And after you go to the reports panel, you can say, I want to run it as a PDF, I want to run it as an HTML, or I want to export it to Excel and run it in SmartView. So you'll have that option still, you just can't do the initiation of the report from SmartView any longer. And so, and I think, you know, I'm going to guess here about why Oracle did that, but I think it's because they want users to start adopting some of the other components of things that they can do out on the web. And so the only way to get you to the web is kind of to force you there. Otherwise, a lot of us would just live in SmartView permanently and we wouldn't leave. So on the web, the look and feel is completely different for the user. It's a much simpler interface. It's very clean. You can set it up so you have a single button to push for most things. And what this then translates to is that that interface itself is highly configurable. And so we're going to go take a look at what is standard. but it is a very quick 10-minute, 15-minute change to change an interface from how it looks to everyone to making an interface role-specific or user-specific, so that users, either by their role or by groups or however we've set up security, they can actually have what is called a different navigation flow than everyone else has. In addition to that, there are now dashboards. So everybody was yammering for dashboard tools, and dashboard tools are now available to users. Users can use dashboards that are created for them, or they can create their own dashboards. And we'll take a quick look at that interface and how easy that is to use. And then the actual appearance of the web is very configurable and finally has what we've yammered for years, has the ability to have a message section so that we can pass information to our users when they sign on. So I'm going to pause here and we're going to hop over actually to the web, and we're going to take a look at the user section, and then we'll go back and start the next section. Now, when you go to sign on to the web, if you're not familiar with it, and I'm just going to make the assumption that not everyone has done all of this at this point, so I won't belabor any points, but if you are an administrator, you will get this screen first when you go to sign on to the cloud. And this is the screen that we use to determine which of our two environments we want to go into if we only own PBCS. If you also own FCCS or the tax module, they share an interface with PBCS. So you might see 4 of these boxes if you own FCCS and have access to all of it. You might see more. So each of these represents an environment, and you have a production environment and a test or dev environment out of the box that comes with the cloud tool. And so on here we can see some basic statistics of how many users have been signed on, and how much it is up and down, so on and so forth. And this is also where we come up here in the right corner. This is where we come to actually set up our users. Integrated security still has to have users being set up and roles assigned, even if you have integrated security. So there's some element of security that's being done here. And the security as we knew it previously from shared services really does not exist anymore, and we'll talk about that in the admin section. That is one of the components that kind of went completely away. So once I've come out here and I determine which environment I want to use, I go ahead and sign on to it by clicking on it. And a user, what we would do with a user is they would be set up, and they'll just have a URL, which is where we'll end up eventually. And they would just sign directly on to the final screen that we're going to get to in another set of clicks here. So this is an intermediate screen, again, only for administrators. This tells us whether our cloud service has been up or down, had any outages. I can look at that historically. This is useful if I'm having issues with my environment. One thing I will say with the cloud environments is I rarely have ever seen red marks in here. It's very rare for your service to go down or for your cloud to go down. And so, you know, you almost consistently have it up and it's up and running. I do think they have an issue with their colors, but why they show all of this as a planned outage every day is they do backup every day. And so every day there is a planned outage that the system is going to kick you off at a time that you determine with Oracle. Usually most of us have it do it like 3 in the morning or something. And they do an automatic backup of your system, both your dev environment and your test environment. So this kind of looks funny because it's like, wow, I don't have that many planned outages, but it's just your daily planned outage for going up. Occasionally you'll see a green box pop in here, which means you didn't have a backup that day. Now, what I have learned about how that happens is Oracle does have some code in the background that's looking at whether you signed on or changed anything. And if nobody signed on to the system at all, it does not do another backup. It just skips that day because you didn't change it from the day before. So occasionally you'll see just the service up icon. So if anybody was ever curious about that, that's kind of how that happens. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and launch the service. And if you bought the cloud product prior to August 1st of last year, when you sign on, you'll sign on to Workspace. Workspace is the default for that code. In US Analytics, we bought our pod long before August of last year. So we hop into here. How you get to the Simplified interface is just by clicking on this. So we're just going to jump right into the Simplified interface. And for the user, this is what they see when they sign on to the system. Now, these in Oracle speak, these are called cards. So each of these icons is a card. This is the default navigation flow that comes with the product. And navigation flow just simply means when I click on this, it takes me to task. When I click on this, it takes me to a submenu of other items, which I can then click on and get someplace else. So the navigation flow is how the cards work. What we click on, what we see when we click on it, how many levels deep of clicks we go. But for a user, they really don't ever have a need to leave this screen because everything that they could possibly need is available from this screen. If we're not an end user, if we're an administrator, we go up here to the left side, and that has 3 bars. It's the navigation panel. Internally, Oracle calls this a hamburger. I guess it kind of does look like a Big Mac, but you can click on the hamburger, the navigation panel, and for an administrator, this is everything else. So while in Workspace we had tons and tons of menus and you got to go start clicking on menus to find something, it's a much simpler navigation, especially for the administrator. The trick is learning where did they stick the things that were on each of the menus. Like, are they here, are they here, are they over here? So kind of finding your way is the tricky part, but they're all out here. Everything is out here that you might possibly need. So going back to the user experience, this navigation flow, they're only going to see icons and navigation components that align with their roles. So like working with the application and looking at data maps and dimensions, that's not going to be in alignment with a user role. And so a user is not going to see this application icon because it's not in alignment with their role. So based on the roles that we've set up and whatever security we've put in, this navigation flow will change a little bit. And then you, as the administrators, you can go customize this navigation flow too. So let's say that rather than clicking on the data icon, which takes me to a form or my form folders, maybe my top 6 form folders, I would rather have them out here on this panel as separate cards. I can go ahead and do that. I can give them their own icons and colors, and I can put them out here. I can create subfolders for them. So I can make navigation as customized as I want. I can leave it at the default. That's all up to you. The second thing that I really like is that the environment look and feel can be changed. Right now, we're at the standard Oracle splash screens. And so from a standard Oracle splash screen, we have this icon up here by the hamburger, which is a little Oracle symbol. We also have this thing across the middle of our page, which is also an Oracle symbol. And you can customize these to be, you know, for your environment. So if I wanted to go out to the internet real quick, and let's say I pick someplace like usanalytics.com, and I think we have an icon on our splash page I can steal. So as soon as that comes up, I'm going to borrow our logo. So I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to copy the image address. Your images have to be hosted somewhere if you're going to use them. Then I can go to the hamburger, the navigation button, and I can go to the Tools Appearance, and I can go ahead and I can dump this URL up here in the logo image. I'm just going to paste it. And I'm going to say I don't want the Oracle background, so I'm going to say none. I don't want to see Oracle across my splash page. In addition to that, I'm not a big fan of blue. I'm going to go with dark gray. Okay? I have noted, I do believe myself, there is a bug on the shapes of the cards, because no matter which one you pick, you see this shape. So I do think there's a bug, or there is something I seriously do not know with this. Once you push save and you go back out to your splash screen, you can see the icon here and no Oracle logo across your page. So these are kind of cool. They give you a look and feel. Functionally, the biggest reason I use these is I make production one color and I make my test environment another color. That way, when I'm going back and forth between my environments, there is no confusion on which environment I'm in. In addition to that, you also have this panel right here, the white, that's a message panel. And you can go back in here where you were, just down a couple of options to announcements. And in the announcement section, I'm on prod here, so I can create an announcement. And I might do something simple like say prod is open, and I could start that. You can set these up for the future so they have a start and an end date. I'll just start it today with no end date. And then down in the actual message itself, I can get my cursor there. Well, maybe I need to put an end date. Let's just end it later. Down in my message itself, you can change your fonts, your sizes, so on and so forth. But you can put a fairly lengthy message here, which the users can actually click on, or we can put something simple like, you know, prod is open and the date that it was last updated, and we can save that. Okay. Says I must enter a value, but I cannot click in here. I think my internet connection here where I'm at is very slow. So I'm going to bypass this for the moment. I'll just hop back out of there. So that's the announcement section, and that'll let you pass information to your users. There is not a way to do this automatically. That's the biggest question I get asked is, can we load these? Can we somehow automatically put them out here? No. If you're going to use announcements, you actually have to go do the announcement yourself. You have to create it. Okay. The other thing for a user that's pretty significant is the dashboarding. So if they go to the dashboard panel and you have pre-created dashboards, they'll be sitting out here already existing. And if you want to create a dashboard, or they want to create a dashboard, there's a create button. This is available to all users. And so you can come out here and click on create. Now, the thing that this is dependent on, for those of you that know planning, is forms. The form is actually fetching the data for the dashboard. So you need to, as an administrator or a power user, you need to create any forms that might need to be created for your users to get data. So you might have a form for your actuals, your budget, your forecast, for your expenses versus your revenue versus your cash flow. You know, all the bazillion forms that we create, you know, you can put them out here. And then the user of the actual dashboard can come out, and it's a very simple multi-step process. There's really 3 required steps. Give the dashboard a name. So I'm just going to call this Angie Demo. I don't have data in this database, so we're not actually going to see any data, but I'll assume that I'm going to want a grid. So I'm going to drop in my form I created this morning as a grid. And then if I also wanted to see that data as a, maybe I wanted to see it as a chart, I could switch to the chart types on the side over here, and I could say I want to show, I don't know, a donut, and I can drop this in. Maybe I want to see it under the grid, and I can drop my donut in down here, a little plus sign, and now I've got two sections. I've got my grid, and I've got my graph, and then maybe I want to put some narrative in it. I can add commentary. I can put that on the side. So I'll add a commentary block. That'll let me put in some free-form comments. So whatever kind of narrative you might have wanted, you can put that in. And then this is all formattable. I think these panels now, a dashboard can have up to 6 or 8 panels. And you can stack them and put them however you want. You can allow them to automatically resize. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this. You can get at outside URLs as long as your firewall is open. So there's a number of different things that you could put on, and you can create a lot of the flash reports and different types of things where users just want to see a quick snapshot, and you know, they can set up all of these and have them out there for use. Once everybody likes what they've created, they can just save it, and then that can then just be clicked on from the main dashboard screen for any future times that I might want to run it. So now I can just click on it, and that's going to take me straight into it to actually execute it. So the system is set up very well with the dashboarding, because if I use 3 or 4 different forms, it automatically knows to create an integrated toolbar for all of the dimensions that match. Any dimensions that don't match, it puts them in the individual windows. Well, how awesome that a user doesn't have to think about that. They don't have to understand global versus local dimensions and variables. The system just automatically does it based on what they pick and choose. If I have a multi-plan type database where I've got financials in one, CapEx in another, workforce in another, you know, I could have a window for each of them. It'll create an integrated drop down for all the dimensions that match. It'll create individual drop downs for the ones that don't inside of the windows. So the dashboarding itself is, I think it's pretty cool. It's very easy to use and manipulate, and gives them kind of another analytic tool to go along with SmartView. And once they learn how to use it, it usually takes about 45 minutes to actually teach them the mechanics of it, and then, you know, kind of hanging out and letting them actually work with it. Other things that users might do, of course, are task lists. Those work the same. They have a prettier window. Data is where they go for their forms. Reports are where they go for FR, if there are financial reports to be run. And rules are only seen if they have access to any rules. So if you give them access to run rules independently, business rules, independent of running inside of a form, they might see the rules folder as well. And then if you have your workflow approvals turned on, they'll see that as well. This panel right here is the most frequent panel for users to kind of just sit on, because pretty much everything they need is right here. The Academy is built in, and it's a knowledge database that comes with PBCS, and it'll take them to basically interactive help. Okay? Now, let's go back to our presentation. That's enough on those guys. Let me find my PowerPoint deck. And let's talk about admin changes with the outline. Okay, with the PBCS tools and on-prem, one of the biggest changes that came was the admin tool is now available for SmartView. If you haven't used the admin tool yet, oh my gosh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It allows you to do multi-updates at a time. We're not going to show that today because it's not a SmartView demo, but go grab the admin tool, download it, and set it up to work with your SmartView, because you'll like making dimension changes a lot more with this tool than you will in either of the editors. The downside to the admin tool in SmartView is that you cannot do deletes. So if you need to do a delete, too bad, so sad, wah wah, you got to go back up to the web and you've got to use one of your 2 editors for deleting. So deletes can't be done, but everything else can. I think you'll like it a lot. Try it out. I'll show you where to get the download if you already have PBCS and or a newer version of planning where it's available. In PBCS now we have the dimension editor, the native one. You'll recognize it as soon as we see it. It's still there and still as clicky as it was. There's also a new dimension editor that is available off the overview screen. Unless somebody's gone through a training, they oftentimes don't realize this one exists. And this one will allow for multi-deletes in particular. That's the greatest thing. I can highlight an entire screen using my Control and Shift keys and delete a whole bunch of things at one time rather than having to do it one click at a time, which is what we have to do in the dimension editor. So we'll take a look at those real quick. And then the other big administrative change that you have to understand with the outline is that when you do a refresh of the database, you know, as much stuff as you have built out in your pod, so a single sign-on or a single instance of PBCS is called a pod, it's going to refresh all of them. So it's not only going to refresh, for those of you that have natively used the tool, you have an application that'll have your 3 plan types. I think 3 is the max. So you may use all 3, you may not. But that's going to be one application and 3 databases that refresh. And then you can have up to 4 ASO cubes, of course, all in their own applications. They're all going to refresh when you go to do the refresh. So the larger your environment is, i.e. the more of these individual databases you have used within your pod instance, the longer your refresh is going to take, particularly if you make a change to your dense dimension structure and you have loaded data. You know, this could run just like it does on-prem. It could run for a long time. And so you have to be kind of careful when you punch that refresh button in the middle of a day on a production system. You should hope that you know how long that's going to take, because that could end up being like pretty long. Now that refresh process is available from 4 different places. We can refresh from Smart View, and the refresh has been moved to the actual sign-on panel. So when you go to sign on, up at the top where your environment is indicated, you can right-click and do your refresh. This was available at some point as a button in one of the Smart View releases, but it's been removed since then. But you can still do it from Smart View, you just have to know where it's at. So it's off of the actual sign-on panel that comes up on the right side of your screen. You can also do it from both of the dimension editors. We'll look real quick at where that is. And then the final place is an action menu. This creates a job. The job is used when we use the automation, the EPM Automate tool, which we're going to go over next month. So sometimes we want to create the jobs, and the jobs have more options. And so we'll look at that one real quick. The other thing from an administrative standpoint is that there's not an ability now to save your outline file. So a lot of admins used to, before they made a change, they'd do a save as, and they'd go to EAS and save that outline file and just have it off there to the side in case they made a boo-boo or they wanted to put stuff back. That ability to save just that one element, it still kind of exists, but it's buried in the snapshot system, and we'll talk about that right after we take a look at this real quick. So functionally, you can still do it. It's just a little bit different. And then the exports and imports of your outline are now built into the tool. And so let's go hop over and look at where those are at real quick. Going back, I went past it. Okay, so first off, the dimension editor as you know it today, you get at from the create and manage. And when you click into here, there's your dimension editor as you know it today. And so, did I not click? So whenever a lot of people use the tool, they come out here because it's where they're comfortable. There's nothing different here. The refresh database is right there, kind of a cloud-looking thing. That's your refresh database option, okay? Now, I prefer anymore the one that's gotten to from the overview screen, and when you come to the overview screen and you go to the dimension tab, from the dimension tab, we can actually get at an outline editor, which I think we're not at a release that has that. Wow. Okay, surprise for me. The older releases don't actually have the editor out here. So only the newer releases, you're going to have a tab to the side right here where my cursor is pointing, where I want to click, but there's nothing here. So I guess we'll get it on our pod when we update in December along with everyone else. But for those of you that have a newer release, you're going to have an icon right over here. It'll be the second tab down, and that is an editor. You'll be able to go into your editor and do all the editing that you do in the base editor, except for now you can do multi-deletes, so on and so forth. So you'll figure it out. It's all WYSIWYG icon driven. And then your imports and exports are right here. Okay? From the snapshot point of view, if I want to do a backup of this before I start, I can do an export, and I can just export everything. That would be a type of a capture of my before picture. Or I might go to the migration tool, which really replaces LCM, and I might come to the migration tool and click on the database, the planning database itself, which is this element right here. So this is divided up by the subtools. So this would be my FR, my financial reporting. This will be my security. This is just what it says, Calc Manager. This is the FDM data management. And this is all things planning. So if I don't know which one I want, I check them all. And then just click export. It creates a snapshot. It saves it up here. If I want to make sure that snapshot is captured for forever, never gets changed, never gets lost, I can go ahead and download it to my desktop. These do not get deleted by Oracle ever. If one gets removed, you can delete the database itself and it still keeps all of your snapshots and folder items. So anytime that those get removed, it's because you removed them. So you want to kind of have some governance over that. And then the last place to have your refresh is off of this action menu. And the reason that we come out here to create a refresh is to create the job that the refresh can run on EPM Automate, and also because it gives us some options. We don't have options in Excel. We don't have options off of the menus. This gives us some options on whether we're logging people off, whether we're stopping active requests, and whether we're letting them back on after the refresh. So we can select those options, save that as a job with a name, and then just click on it when we want to run it. Okay. All right, let me jump to the next section. Whoops, sorry about that. My driving on my screen isn't very good. All right, the next big area that changed for brand new admins especially, or older admins especially, is the rules section. We do not have calc scripts anymore. We must go to rules because there is no more EAS. So you have to write all of those things that were calc scripts previously. They have to be converted to be business rules. And that's not as bad as it sounds because you can still do what you did before. If you don't want to use the fancy GUI, you can just add a script window and code it just like you used to do it. But there's a lot of built-in features and functions that are really out there to prevent you from having to recode things that repetitively you do over and over again. So I can take a snippet of code that I run over and over again in a whole bunch of scripts, and I can make an object out of that, and then I can embed that object inside of my rule. So you have all the same functionality, etc. But the big key thing about the business rule window is, for those of us who are hardcore, long-term, S-based planning admins, this is the only place where we can see our block information. So how many blocks do I have? Is my data loaded or unloaded? How many people are signed on? What are the sessions? What's all that look like? That's all out there actually under the rules section. So that's a little bit counterintuitive to most admins, including myself. When I first started, I was just like, well, that is dumb. Like, why did they do that? And I still don't really know why they did it, because nobody really ever answers that question. But I would say if I were to try to take an educated guess, I would say that this happened this way because it exists there today. They put it out there when they created Calc Manager, so that you remember Calc Manager used to be a separate module. That's why it has a pop-up window still, and because it is still kind of a separate module. And so that you didn't have to sign back onto planning to see certain things. It was out here under the database properties. So when we go to the database properties, this is where we can see a lot of stuff that we can't see anywhere else, because they hide the back end of Essbase from us in PBCS, whether we like it or not. This is just what happens. So I can right-click on my database, and then I can see some of the stuff I'm used to being able to get at: locks, start and stops, restructures, clears. Clear is available from the overview menu as well. So I've got some of those things out there. If I just click on it without right-clicking, it's going to go ahead and load up most of the tabs that we're used to seeing. So I can see my dimensions, how they're set up, how many sparse and dense. I can see my statistics, whether my data is loaded, how big my block is, how much data I've got, transactions, modifications. These two, I don't rely on these ever, because I don't think that they reflect appropriately what's actually happening. I think, especially in transactions, Oracle's dynamically changing a lot of our configuration stuff on the fly, so I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the information in these two, but these two should be very useful for getting to some of the stuff that you're used to being able to see. When you're done with it, you just close the window. This window can be left up simultaneous to your cloud window, so I can jump back and forth from my cloud window to my Calc Manager window if you have a need to. Otherwise, it's just when you're done, you close it. You'll always get this message: do I want to really leave this page? Yes. You don't have to close anything. It just shuts itself down. So you can hop out of that. Okay, so that's probably one of the bigger changes, is having to actually use Rules Manager. We'll come back to that in just a second if we have some time. I want to keep moving and hit a couple more things from the admin side. From the security and LCM side, the biggest changes were that we don't have shared services anymore. It's gone. And so from the whole concept of actually creating a user, this product, as does every other cloud product, it uses Oracle's Domain Identity Manager. Now, what that means for you as an admin is you go set them up. You have to put an email in there, and then Oracle emails your user and gives them instructions to set their password. It gives them a temporary password to start with. It gives them instructions on how to set their password, and it also gives them a URL. You might want to set up a test user or two, and you go walk through that so you can help your users get through that, because as with several other things at Oracle, this is not always as intuitive as we would like it to be, and some users just quite frankly can't figure it out. And so you'll want to have walked through the process yourself, make sure that you know where to click and go so that you can help them through it. The number one admin thing we get with new installations is, can you reset my password? No, we can't. What we have to do is go out to that first screen that I showed you. We have to go to the user, and we basically have to have Oracle resend them this information again, and then that resets them. Well, there is a place where they can go to reset themselves, but again, it's easier for you to just have Oracle send them the information again than to try to get them to the screen to do their own Oracle Domain Identity Manager work. It's really a little bit convoluted yet. So this is kind of a tricky part. After you've created the user and you've assigned them to roles, and roles are user, planner, power user, administrator. Those are the default roles. You can create some custom ones. Everything else is done through access control. So all the rest of the security as we know it is done through a section called access control. And that's where we go to create groups, to assign users to groups, and to basically provision what those groups and or users can see. And then there is a third level. Well, access control creates the groups and assigns the users to the groups, does some base provisioning, but the actual security then of those groups is done from the dimension editor itself. And so this part of it is a little bit harder to grasp when you've been long-term shared services. For new users, they really like it because it's fairly straightforward. It's 3 places to go, and it's going to be set up in one of those 3 places. Okay, so to kind of review with security, what are those 3 places? Well, the first one's going to be that screen that we use to sign on, and I don't think we can actually see it, this screen. So if we go backwards from here, 1 screen, that's going to take us up to where we have, up in the upper right-hand corner, we have our users. This is where we set users up from. It's also where we set up SSO. That's where SSO is defined from. So it's an admin screen. Normal user can't see it. Okay? So that's going to be your first layer of when you're setting up your security. Your second layer, the access control, which is where you get your groups from. Your access control is off of your tools menu, and then you're just going to come into access control. Sorry about that. And this is where you're going to create your groups, provision, kind of manage the roles, what they can do. And then the third layer is going to be found at your rules, your forms, and your dimensions. And so we'll just go straight to the dimension one. Almost everybody's got security on scenario. So if we went to scenario and we clicked on an individual scenario, that's going to highlight a little key. And the little man with the key is where we go in and actually assign the particular access that we want, either by user or by group. So it's fairly straightforward. When you're debugging, it's fairly straightforward. You do have to remember, you know, a lot of places, especially if you've done security at every level where security is possible. If you have it on forms, if you have it on rules, there's a lot of stuff. So the snapshots themselves, probably the greatest thing about the snapshots is that if you need to go grab an item that you changed from yesterday because you decided you don't want that change and you didn't make a backup ahead of time, the greatest thing about the snapshots is Oracle takes them every night. So when you go out to your snapshot panel, which is found off of your, you go to the overview panel and then to migration, and you're going to see an artifact snapshot. That's what it's called on your system too. This is the snapshot taken last night. I can go down into this snapshot. I can open up my application, which this is called SBench. It's a benchmarking application that we have. And I can go down into the plan type, and you know, I can keep coming down. So I can rescue a dimension and re-import it. I can grab a data form. Maybe I changed this one. And if I want to get to yesterday's copy or, you know, whenever the backup was last taken, I just click on it and click import. And that's just like getting it from a backup. And you have the ability as a user community to save these snapshots. EPM Automate will cover that, how to save off a series of these. So maybe you have a snapshot, you know, 7 snapshots that you keep out there. But this is really nice, especially from a development standpoint, because we can move things back and forth from dev to prod, prod to dev without ever going back down to the ground. EPM Automate will let us shoot the data straight from here over to our other environment. And then if we want to actually use it, we can just import it. And so it's very simple. We'll walk through that process in 2 weeks when we do the EPM Automate session. Okay, so that is what we're going to cover in the EPM Automate section. We're going to go through EPM Automate replaced Maxell, and so you can still do scripting, full scripting of your entire load, calc, everything that you do on your database. You're just going to use a different tool. It doesn't have as many commands, but I think it's robust enough. I haven't found a lot of things where I go, oh gosh, darn it, I wish we had that. I think everything that I've actually wanted to do is actually out there. And so we'll take a look specifically at best practices for migration, because this is always a big problem for new users. How best to move snapshots back and forth. When we reload a snapshot, when is a failure actually a failure? Because sometimes a failure is just an information message. And then we'll also cover how to reboot your system. Just like with on-premise, you may need to reboot the entire planning system. That's available through EPM Automate, and then some other cool things that you can actually do with EPM Automate. One other thing that I'll just throw out there, I didn't put it in the list, but I wanted to show a couple of you where some of your diagnostic and report features are actually at. So if you go out to System Reports is where we actually get at some of our access control reports. So if you have set up security at a number of different levels, you're having a problem with a user, this is where you can come and you can say, okay, I want to look by user or group, and I want to run a report, show me read, write, or none, show me users or objects, and show me what was assigned versus what they're inheriting. That's going to be the effective access, show inherited from group, and I can create reports from here. So that's kind of hidden out here under your monitor and explore. There's also some application diagnostics that are hid out here. FR, really not hard to find. It's under reporting. So just like Calc Manager, when you click on rules, it pops up a window. FR pops up a window too. For those of you who are trying to create books, the book function is done from the navigation of the repository. That's why there's an Explore Repository button. So this will take you to the folder navigation part, and that'll get you to what you need for setting up and creating your books and whatnot. The Reporting Web Studio is I think, really good. You don't need a client anymore. That's a relief. And so getting to it is great. The couple other things that you may be looking for initially when you sign on, they're hidden under your username. So when you click on your username, that opens up a panel, and that's going to let you get at all your downloads. So if you don't know where to download SmartView, EPM Automate, you don't need Financial Reporting Studio anymore, and that's not available anymore if you have a newer version. We have the older version, so we still have it. But your SmartView download, also available from the Technology Network. This planning extension is how you do your dimension editing from planning, so you can grab that from here as well. There are some other things now that they've thrown out here, so you can explore that at your convenience. And the other thing that's out here that at some point as an admin you're going to have to know is the day that you come up with a bug. There is a new feature when you log your bug on your SR that says, did you provide feedback? What they're talking about is this button right here, this provide feedback button. So the process for an SR kind of changed. If I'm working in a screen and the screen is giving me an error, what I do before I log the SR is I click on provide feedback, I go recreate my error, and then then it will close. There's a little icon that pops up. It'll stay up because it's doing a recording, and then you close it after you're done recreating your error. And when you log your SR, you say, yes, I provided feedback, and give them the approximate time. That way they can go look through whatever file that creates for them and they can find it. Many times, if you log an SR without providing feedback, the first thing you'll get back from Oracle is, please go provide feedback. And of course, that does not make any sense to us before we know that this exists. Because I'm like, what do you mean give you feedback? I already logged my SR. Like, please just go look at my error. But this is what they're talking about. So you can pop out here and punch the button, send them a recording, a picture of what's happening, and then punch the button again. And sometimes, like, it's just a message. Sometimes the problem is it does nothing. You know, you just live with that. All right. That's about all I've got for you. We probably are going to have to do an admin number 3, Michelle, because I think we've got a few more things we could throw in after we do EPM Automate on number 2. Thank you all for spending your lunch hour with me and attending. Hopefully at some point I'll get to talk to some of you. Ping me on LinkedIn and say hi at some point. And if you have other things you'd like to have covered, let me know. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jasmine. Are we done?
We do have a question, if you have a moment.
Okay, I do.
Yeah, so the question is, in regards to security, can you integrate with Windows AD, or are you restricted to Oracle's native security process?
No, you do have the ability to integrate. So that's off here on this panel, right? I think our release is too old, and your release might be too. There is now a SSO tab, and it's located here off of your user tab, and you'll have to have a little bit of a newer release to get to it. So if you're not seeing an SSO tab, and I may not be seeing it because I'm not a domain, there's 2 levels of security at the admin level. Our domain administrator is Brian. That's probably why I'm not seeing the SSO tab, is I'm not a domain administrator, so I can't create a user. I can edit current users, but I can't create one. So that domain administration tab will expose the SSO. So if you have the domain role, you'll see the SSO tab, and the setup's pretty quick. So you'll be able to punch one of these that says SSO, and you can set it up. So yes, you definitely can integrate. Were there other questions?
That was it, and I know we're up against time, so thank you so much, Angie, and everybody who answered the poll and said they wanted to register for the next event. We will go ahead and register you, and you'll receive a confirmation email shortly. If anybody missed the poll, you can just go to our events page on our website and register there. So hope to see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining.